Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning, I start by saluting and giving thanks to the nurses and doctors and the support staff of every hospital, clinic, and medical institution who have woken up every morning and gone out to work to face the challenges of this COVID pandemic. I want to say thank you to our teachers who have labored tirelessly and continue to give our children some form of education, I know personally of your struggle. As last August, I found 34 children in South Georgetown in a depressed community who had no formal education from March 2020 to September 21. Nothing. You see, Mr. Speaker, these are the poorest of the poor, not fortunate to attend a private school or one of the better resourced public schools. These are the forgotten ones, the ones with no devices, no tablets, no computers, no internet package. Mommy gone to work with the only phone with a data plan, no access to online learning. The result? In that group of 7 8-year-olds, I found 4 that could not read in the heart of Georgetown. Mr. Speaker, there's a huge disparity in the educational fortunes of those who cannot afford to pay for private education and those who attend the very small list of leading public institutions, and those who are condemned for the rest of their lives to menial jobs because of their opportunity for a better quality of education and tutorship, particularly at the primary level, was denied to them because of their absence of technology in the schools where they're forced to attend. This disparity has now reached the status of a virtual apartheid in education. Well, between the well-resourced and privileged and those who are condemned to attend school with little or no internet. We all know that there is a direct correlation between access to the internet and the prospects of improved results and better matriculation. And that's why the provisions of this budget for this and the expansion of the telecommunications sector is critical. Children who have little or no access to the internet will not access educational material and resources which are essential to improving their opportunities to secure better grades. Although very useful and necessary is improvement for the learning channel, I want to say children watching a blank screen on the learning channel with no one around or at the other end to say, "I'm sorry, did you get that? Let me go over it," puts them at a tremendous disadvantage. Mr. Speaker, in order to reverse the virtual apartheid in education between the better resource, the connected, the haves and the have-nots, a targeted allocation of financial resources to the most disadvantaged and underprivileged sections of community of our society is required. A Marshall Plan for the underprivileged schools, teachers training facilities, educational research facilities, devices like laptops, tablets, and connectivity are critical. All of these cannot be found in sufficient quantities in Budget 2022. Whether urban or rural or in the hinterland, the schools without access or limited access should be allocated greater resources to afford the children of the underprivileged a chance of real participation in the bounty Guyana has to offer. This will not happen by way of handouts, but by affording them the opportunity of being properly qualified at the highest level in order to benefit from the local content framework that has been established. Mr. Speaker, some interesting figures have emerged amongst the D-grade theoretical performances that we have been drowning in. And the last presentation was just testimony of that. 11,000 laptops to be provided for the approximately 200,000 children and students receiving education just does not cut it. We're the fastest growing oil producing nation in the world, but the best we can do is 11,000 laptops? Surely now with access to $607 million from the oil reserves, every Guyanese child should have been given a laptop. Mr. Speaker, too often the honorable members on the other side of the House forget, and also I want to remind the general public, but they forget that prior to 2015, the PPP was in power for 23 years. Mr. Speaker, it is ludicrous, in fact, sad, that they come to this House screaming and shouting on what was not done in 5 years and have not acknowledged their failures in the previous 23 years that have placed us today in perpetual backwardness. Mr. Speaker, I am proud of the rich legacy and foundation we have left to facilitate the expansion of Guyana's digital economy. In just 4 short years, Mr. Speaker, you will recall in 2015, it was the APNU AFC coalition that operationalized the government's e-government fiber optic network, built by the Chinese in 2014, but never put into operation by the PPP government. Mr. Speaker, it was through the use of this cable that we were able to provide secure internet access to 116 government agencies with state-of-the-art video conferencing facilities, 79 access points, free internet connections to over 250 schools, access to internet free at over 173 community hubs, from Oriela to Arnaputa, where the women were able to take online orders for their peanut butter, to locations in Berbice and Essequibo. Mr. Speaker, none of the provisions in the budget sufficiently makes these things possible and a proper expansion. Mr. Speaker, we started off with a huge advantage, having this infrastructure in place when COVID hit us. And it is sad it has not been, in fact, expanded. In fact, we are heading in the opposite direction. The typical PPP modus operandi, where government towers are being used to facilitate the expansion of a private network, which more than likely in a few years' time, government will be buying service from, as opposed to developing our own national network. Mr. Speaker, let me explain. An expanded government-owned network is how we could provide free internet access to our children. Along with those laptops, we could also provide free of charge the little MiFi, the portable internet devices. So in all the poor and depressed areas, children would be able to access the internet. Mr. Speaker, what we have seen in this budget is limited, poor from this We Care government. Mr.
Honorable members, we want to hear this contribution from the honorable member, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we will all recall the $200 million US dollars taxpayers' money stolen by the offspring of the highest representative of the land, a fiber optic cable that has never been seen, and the battalion on the other side has the temerity to talk about clean hands. And of course, the empty vessel, the tiny empty vessel on the other side of the house with his useless comments about sticky fingers. I say to you, those were some big sticky fingers. Mr. Speaker, we're not stupid. We recall the massive sticky hands, the laptop scam, the gold scam, the charity walk falling down, the Amila road to nowhere. I have no more time to list the rest. Mr. Speaker, but most unfortunate is this. Audit report. Prime Minister's office purchases 790 million in hampers, but provides bills for 213 million. Am I lying? This is the audit office's report. Talk about sticky fingers. So, Mr. Speaker, the National Data Management Authority has moved from a highly group of trained Guyanese professionals who started the digitization of our records in all kinds of registries and places. But what did we do? We fired them. And so today, they are busy inputting information for the COVID-19 voucher program. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the budget provision, I know that the Honorable Prime Minister is an honorable man. And I'm hoping that he will shed some light on some of these issues. We observed 2.6 billion in the capital program for the National Data Management Authority. But Appendix T, it shows that the recurrent budget has remained the same for last year. So the burning question that must be asked is how can the NDMA carry out such a huge capital program with the same recurrent budget as last year, which was less than 60 million compared to 2.6 billion this year. Then we see the massive increase in recurrent charges in the program to 024, telecommunications and innovation. And that has moved from 76.8 million in 2020 to 774.3 million in 2022. I hope that this will be explained, Mr. Prime Minister. Now, we know that the government for a long time likes to spend money under the recurrent expenditure because, of course, it's consumables like training programs, scholarships, whatever. I want to remind this honorable House of the theft of over $639 million belonging to the government of Guyana between October 19, 2011 and April 28, 2015, when monies from the Public Service Ministry was not spent by the ministry, but was sent to the office of the President without any accountability. Those funds were expended. Mr. Speaker, what worries me the most about this budget is the total lack of a strategic plan. We don't see a philosophy, a policy. I may have missed it, and I'm happy to be informed. So what does Budget 2022 offer as it claims steadfast against all the challenges, specifically to those 8-year-old boys I told you about who still can't read? I want to talk about telecommunications. Mr. Speaker, what is most revealing in Budget 2022 is the fact that what it doesn't say, what it doesn't show, the project resources that should be there, that must be there, if we're going to ensure that every young Guyanese boy or girl, regardless of where they live, will have a slice of this big, fantastic pie we're convincing ourselves we're baking. Mr. Speaker, the telecommunications liberalization was brought into being with great fanfare. But here are a couple of facts I want to share. You will remember that you will recall that on assuming office in 2015, and with the establishment of the Ministry of Public Telecommunications in 2016, we, in a matter of months, brought to this Parliament the telecoms legislation, passed the Telecoms Act, the first drafts of which emerged in 2001. 2011 in the Parliamentary Select Committee, and in a matter of a few months, we brought that legislation to the Parliament and passed it. Mr. Speaker, but the issue is, what is liberalization really? And I want to say, liberalization is the creation of an environment that would allow more people to come into the market, improving the volume of service, internet and telecommunication services, competition between the ICT service providers, and most importantly, improving the quality of service and ensuring a reduction of price. Mr. Speaker, where is the flood of new participants coming into this sector? Let me take this opportunity, as I have done on many times, to acknowledge the contribution of GT&T to the development of our communication landscape and for their continued support to Guyana. But Mr. Speaker, I want to raise a very thorny issue. As you know, an important part of liberalization is ending the monopoly agreement that GT&T and AT&I, the US-based parent company, had in place. And as you know, as the lawyers in this room would know, a contract is a legitimate document. And so the APNU AFC government proceeded to enter into negotiations to amicably settle this issue. You cannot have liberalization and continue with the same thing if GT&T and AT&I have still a monopoly. So there are a couple important questions that I want to ask. We were near to completing the settlement agreement. I want to ask the most honorable Prime Minister, was the final settlement agreement concluded between the government of Guyana and AT&I? If no, we want to know if the government of Guyana, if AT&I and GT&T have withdrawn their claims for compensation, and if they have, what was the settlement date? Where is the agreement posted for transparency and accountability so that the citizens of this country could be informed? What agreements were made on the large amount of outstanding taxes owed by the company based on GRA assessments? Was a cash payment, Mr. Speaker, made to the GRA as a settlement of the tax issues? And if it was made, where is it? What is the total income also accumulated to date in the Universal Service Fund? Mr. Speaker, we are speaking about figures that range in the vicinity of $2.9 billion at a minimum, and the Guyanese must be informed and must know. Mr. Speaker, I have perused the budget of 2020, 2021, and 2022, and there's not one single reference to this issue. And I would have expected some disclosure at some time from the most honorable Prime Minister and member of this House. Mr. Speaker, I have to admit I've come to this Parliament today with a very heavy heart and trepidation. I know that we will be recorded as part of history, making time in my beloved Guyana. But with the annals of Guyana, with all its bounty that we have received, record these moments as the worst of times. I feel it will if we don't do something fast. Mr. Speaker, let's be honest. What have we done? What have we seen in these budget debates? The vilest and lowest show that could ever be performed. We have all been drawn into a useless tit for tat, a lot about the APNU, the AFC, the PPP, what they did, what they did not do. 5 days of verbal abuse that we call a debate. Shouts of the most derogatory statements, insults about to women from across this way. Mr. Speaker, what is sad too is that the fake news, the fake information peddled in this House has been at an all-time high. And I must correct some of them. Imagine the Minister of Education came to this honorable House ranting and raving on that we on this high side were not supporting telling Guyanese getting vaccinated. How unfamiliar is she with the truth? Clearly she doesn't read her own newspaper, because if she went to Guyana Times September 27, 2021, the headline of one of their articles reads, AFC Executive Host Program encouraging persons to take vaccine. And guess what? 3 weeks ago, I was very thankful to see almost a full page report on a discussion from an Alliance on the Move program with Dr. Somar that had been reproduced in Guyana Times. Give credit where it is due. Thank you, Guyana Times. People don't get carried away with the wagging finger and the shouts. Take what she says not with a grain of salt, but with a pound of salt. And when she shouts and the colleagues on the other side of the House shout about conflict of interest, remember this book, where we have the design and layout by her friend and former MP, Mr. Harry Gill. I hope that the proper procurement procedures were held and took place in this. I hope that the tender was published somewhere. So, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, the word corruption, and I know you have had a difficult time, the word corruption and rigging must be the most overused words that we've heard from this other side of the House. Overused to the extent, you need to listen to this part, overused to the extent that the poor Vice President yesterday afternoon had to host a press conference. And what was he saying? Let me quote you. He says, unfortunately, what we had anticipated, which would have been a contest of ideas and vision, through all the rhetoric, this doesn't become very evident to the people what we're hoping to achieve. His own MPs in their budget speeches have not delivered the message. And poor Vice President had to host a press conference to rescue the message or the lack of messages. But I said sad, and I don't use my words just like that. And this is where the Honorable MP Yvonne Pearson is absolutely correct. The numbers don't lie. Check the NCN page on the live stream of this press conference, and there are only 109 people watching. And they're watching at 27 minutes, 0.59, 27 minutes, 59 seconds into the conference. Now go to the Vice President's page, and thankfully he has only 870 people watching. Now I want to ask Sherrod, how you got more than 9,000 people watching in the first half hour after they arrested you? But I want to tell the Vice President a little secret. Hear what you have to say. Share the live, share the live, share the link. Now, this is sad but true, because the Honorable empty vessel on the other side of the House, the Honorable Minister McCoy, is responsible for public information. He came to this Honorable House and told us about the 100 staff he got. And we saw in the budget all the new equipment he can get. And yet, he is not delivering because the people are watching. Then we had a member on the other side who I had a pleasure of working with in the past. She talked about corruption. Nothing was done in the previous administration. And she talked about the success of tourism. Well, you know that tourism is my little baby. And I'm happy MP Rajkumar mentioned and reminded us that in our short 5 but productive years, Guyana for the first time got 6 international awards. Never heard of before. So I say thank you to the private sector, who have been the ones like TAG, who have struggled with the product for years and years. They deserve the accolades. But Mr. Speaker, on a serious note, the high visitor arrivals we are experiencing today are the direct result of one single factor: increased airlift. And we delivered that to the people of Guyana. 2 reputable airlines, American and JetBlue, who have brought competition, quality service, and lower prices to the market. Never achieved in the 23 years of you know what. Mr. Speaker, the absolutely staggering amount of new airlines that have signed up to come to Guyana since the expansion of the new airport under this new administration is perhaps indicative of the success of the Minister of Tourism and her ability to attract new business and investment in the airline industry. Because guess what, my friends? We know that the investment in the airline industries and the new airlines that we heard were coming, like Emirates, what have we seen? 0, nil, none, not. And she can even choose in Russian, it is still 0. My friend's relationship with the truth and accuracy is very strained and seeks refuge in the creative imaginings of a pedestrian approach to tourism. Unlike the Barbadian tagline, beyond your imagination, my friend may wish to consider the more accurate and descriptive tagline, simply no imagination. Mr. Speaker, I want to remind us all that we shouldn't throw stones if you live in a glass house. The tourism minister clearly was under pressure from the bad behaved colleagues I have on this side. So I apologize for that. But you can't come to this honorable house, forget you're a U.S. citizen, get sworn in, remember a few days later, renounce it, and then come back and get sworn in again. and then lecture us about integrity and honesty. And I want to make a simple observation.
Before you make that observation, honorable member, we will need an extension.
Thank you, Comrade Speaker. Comrade Speaker, I move that the honourable member be given 5 minutes to conclude her presentation.
Thank you, Honorable Chief Whip. Honorable member, you may continue and conclude in 5 minutes.
And as I was saying, I want to make a simple observation. Even Jesus had a Judas. Mr. Speaker, this one Guyana concept that has been touted, I want everybody to know is just a simple public relations campaign sold to the highest bidder. And if you go back, anybody could go online. In fact, DPI has a Info Hub program on GuyPex 2018. You remember the conference, the first oil and gas conference held by, organized by former Minister Raffle Trotman. Over 600 people. Well, you know that we had a beautiful video played there. 2018, go back and watch that video, which is online. At the end of it, you will see the One Guyana logo. Right? So, it's just a matter of who is willing to pay for what. So we have to question really, you know? And I want to know if this One Guyana has replaced our national motto. As I'm hearing, our national motto, one people, one nation, one destiny. As we're hearing that it is going to be on the $2,000 bill. So that would be a shame. You see, One Guyana, like the Safe City project, like the ICT access for hinterland.
We're going to withdraw shame, right? We are going to withdraw shame. We're going to get the records, right? Go ahead, Honorable.
Mr. Speaker, I said safe, so I think you might have misheard it. So, One Guyana, like the One Guyana, the Safe City project, the ICT access, the Linden Call Center, all those are projects developed by us, 2016, 2017. And you know what? I want to make the point that those projects are good projects and they should be continued. We cannot have a government, we cannot have a country where when we change governments, everything must stop. Mr. Speaker, these debates are testimony of how damaged we all are today. The precarious state Guyana finds herself in. Mr. Speaker, is this the best we can do? Mr. Speaker, we are at an all-time low. I recall when this parliament had a women's caucus, when we could agree to respectfully disagree, when I could snap a photograph of the Honorable MP Gail Teixeira waltzing with former MP Michael Carrington at a social that allowed us to better understand where we all came from, our challenges, and our resulting positions. Mr. Speaker, at a time when we realized that over 217,000 votes means nearly 50% of the voting population, we realized that it means that consultation and civility and development is a necessary. Not talk about developing the PNC, the APNU, the AFC, the PPP, but developing Guyana. A word and concept hardly called and heard in these debates. A time when we understand that all sides of this massive divide have a right and privilege to shape a future based on consultation with all the people of Guyana that we represent. I say it is my country too. I say it is our country too. Mr. Speaker, I heard recently the Speaker of the British Parliament, who was reprimanding an overly exuberant parliamentarian saying, "Order, order, the people of this great nation deserve to hear these proceedings." And I thought how sad it is that 90% of what is shouted in this parliament is useless noise, insults, inaccuracies. Don't the people of this great nation deserve better? Mr. Speaker, we have all gone so far up a one-way street, heading in the wrong direction. I dare say that the only result this nation will reap is bitterness, strife, and who knows what else. Mr. Speaker, it is my hope that at the end of this process, some of the recommendations proposed to enhance this budget might be taken on board in good faith. That what appears to be massive borrowing, growing inflation, and billions of dollars going into a failing sugar industry that has failed to meet any targets can be addressed, and the many questions and concerned answers. Mr. Speaker, I hope too that healing and reconciliation might be proposed so we can build a prosperous Guyana for the benefit of all her most deserving citizens. Mr. Speaker, an eye for an eye has led us to a place of darkness where none of us can now see. Thank you very much.